Mrs. Adeyemi, step away from your desk and keep your hands where I can see them.
What's this about? We're preparing for tomorrow's staffing review.
Once is a mistake, twice is suspicious. Yvonne Adeyemi did this hundreds of times across multiple years and left a paper trail for every single one. The residents paid the price.
We're investigating discrepancies involving employee staffing records submitted for state reimbursement.
There must be some misunderstanding.
She would not get the chance to explain the names on the page. By the time investigators walked into her office that Tuesday morning in October of 2021, they had already cross-checked 37 months of payroll data against the facility's electronic badge logs. The numbers did not match. They were not even close. Hillcrest Skilled Nursing in Conyers, Georgia. 142 licensed beds. A state contract worth more than $4 million a year. And an administrator who had been signing off on staffing records that, according to the badge scanners at the back entrance, described nurses who were never in the building. The state called it fraud. The families called it something else. Quick question before we go any further. Have you ever sat in a hospital hallway or a nursing home day room, pressing a call button and wondering why nobody was coming? Tell me about it in the comments. And if you are new here, subscribe. This channel covers cases that nursing home families have been fighting to get attention on for years, and stories like this one almost never make it onto the evening news. Yvonne Adeyemi was born in 1972 in Ibadan, Nigeria, the second of 4 children in a family that valued education above almost everything else. Her father taught secondary school mathematics. Her mother kept the household books for a small import business that brought British textiles into the southwest of the country. The family lived in a 2-story concrete house at the edge of the university quarter, and Yvonne's earliest memories, according to a profile published in a Georgia State alumni newsletter in 2002, were of her mother sitting at the dining table at night with 3 ledger books open and a pencil tucked behind one ear. When Yvonne was 11, the family relocated to Atlanta, Georgia. Her father had been offered a research position with the DeKalb County school system, and her mother, a methodical woman who did not like surprises, had spent 2 years planning the move down to the school enrollment forms. They settled first in a small apartment off Buford Highway, and later, after 18 months of saving, in a modest brick ranch in Stone Mountain. She attended Stone Mountain High School, where teachers later remembered her as quiet, organized, and almost stubbornly punctual. Her transcripts show straight A's in every science course she took. A guidance counselor's recommendation letter, recovered years later from her college admissions file, described her as exceptionally responsible, with a maturity and discipline rarely seen in 17-year-olds. Another teacher noted that Yvonne had a particular gift for paperwork. She could fill out a form, the teacher wrote, faster and more accurately than most of the school's administrative staff. She enrolled at Georgia State University in 1990, working part-time at a Publix bakery near the Decatur MARTA station to help pay for textbooks. She graduated in 1994 with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, passed her NCLEX on the first attempt, and accepted a floor position at a long-term care facility in Decatur called Magnolia Manor. The early years of her nursing career were, by every account, unremarkable in the best possible way. She showed up early. She stayed late. She memorized medication lists. She learned the names of every resident on her hall within her first 2 weeks, and within her first 3 months she had memorized which of them liked their pillows propped at which angle. A 1997 performance review from her unit manager described her as calm under pressure, particularly with confused or combative residents, and meticulous with documentation. 2 years later, the same manager noted that she had the temperament of someone who will end up running a facility one day. She married Femi Adeyemi in 1998. He was a software engineer at a regional bank in Atlanta, a quiet, methodical man who liked to cook on Sundays and who had grown up 2 hours south of Ibadan in a town she had visited as a child. They were introduced at a friend's birthday party in Stone Mountain. They were engaged 6 months later. They bought a small townhouse in Lithonia with hardwood floors and a tiny fenced backyard. Their first son, Tunde, was born in 2000. Their second son, Adebayo, followed in 2003. She earned her nursing home administrator's license in 2007, the year Tundi started elementary school, and moved out of bedside nursing and into management. She bounced between two mid-sized facilities in the Atlanta suburbs, both well-regarded, both quiet, both unremarkable. Her evaluations during those years used the same phrases over and over again. Detail-oriented, reliable, demonstrates initiative, works well independently, occasionally needs guidance on protocol, but learns quickly and applies feedback with consistency. In 2014, at the age of 42, she was recruited to take over the administrator's role at Hillcrest Skilled Nursing in Conyers, Georgia. The facility had been struggling. 2 prior administrators had left in 18 months. State inspectors had cited the home for documentation lapses and medication errors. The corporate owners, a regional chain based in North Carolina, wanted someone who could clean it up. They paid her $126,000 a year, plus a performance bonus tied to compliance metrics and occupancy rate. Yvonne Adeyemi, by every reasonable measure, was the right person for that job. She had the credentials. She had the temperament. She had spent 20 years building a reputation as the woman who could make a difficult unit run on schedule. Within 6 months of her arrival, Hillcrest passed its annual state survey with no significant deficiencies for the first time in 5 years. Within a year, occupancy was at 94%. For her first 3 years at Hillcrest, by every available record, the facility ran the way it was supposed to run. In the 4th year, something changed. Skilled nursing facilities in Georgia, like skilled nursing facilities in every state, operate under a layered set of staffing requirements. Federal regulations under 42 CFR, Section 483.35, require a registered nurse on duty at least 8 consecutive hours per day, 7 days a week, and licensed nursing staff available 24 hours a day. State Medicaid reimbursement, which makes up the bulk of revenue for most facilities, is tied to minimum direct care hours per resident per day. In Georgia, that figure sits at roughly 2 hours of direct care per resident per 24-hour period, with documentation requirements layered on top. The system that enforces this is almost entirely a paper system. Each shift, the charge nurse or administrative designee maintains a staffing log. The log records who was scheduled, who actually worked, what hours they worked, and what licensure level they held. That log feeds into quarterly reports submitted to the Georgia Department of Community Health. Those reports, in turn, drive reimbursement calculations. A facility that meets or exceeds minimum staffing receives full per diem payments. A facility that falls short can be cited, fined, or, in severe cases, placed on a corrective action plan that restricts new admissions and freezes the revenue line. The catch, as anyone who has worked inside a long-term care facility will tell you, is that the staffing log is generated, signed, and submitted by the facility itself. State inspectors visit periodically. Surveyors review records during annual recertification. But day to day, the paper that determines whether a home gets paid is the paper the home produces. There is a second record. Electronic badge scanners at the staff entrance record when each employee enters and exits the building. Payroll software, integrated with that badge system, calculates hours worked for tax and wage purposes. In theory, those two systems should cross-check the staffing log perfectly. A nurse listed on the log as working an 8-hour shift should appear in the badge system as entering and leaving on schedule. In practice, no one cross-checks them. The badge data lives with HR, usually on a vendor server hosted off-site. The payroll data lives with the corporate office, 3 states away in some cases. The staffing log lives in the administrator's office, in a binder, in a drawer. They are 3 streams of information that travel through 3 different filing cabinets and almost never meet in the same room. There is a third record that matters even less to the state, but matters most to the residents themselves. It is the call light log. Every time a resident presses the button beside the bed, a console at the nurse's station chimes, and a small light flashes outside the room. The console records the time the light was activated, the time it was answered, and the time it was reset. Most facilities do not pull those logs unless something has gone wrong. Most facilities do not pull them, even then. Yvonne Adeyemi, in her 7 years as administrator of Hillcrest, knew exactly where each of those records lived. She knew which she could edit. She knew which she could not. She knew, most importantly, that the only one any state regulator was likely to ever ask for was the one she controlled. The first falsified entry investigators were able to identify, working backward from badge records years later, dated to September of 2017. A licensed practical nurse named Caitlin Pierce was listed on the staffing log as having worked a 16-hour double on the long-term care wing on the night of September 14th. The badge system showed that Pierce had not entered the building that day at all. She had, according to payroll and her own travel records, been on approved vacation in Destin, Florida, with her husband and 2 children. The log was signed by Yvonne Adeyemi. It was, on its own, the kind of clerical error that could have been explained away. A scheduling carryover, an auto-populate field that didn't get corrected, a name that stayed on the roster after a last-minute call-out. But investigators kept finding them. Then they kept finding more. By the end of 2017, the gap between the roster and reality had become a method. Yvonne would build out the master schedule each Monday morning, distribute it to the nursing staff, and then quietly maintain a second version, modified after the fact, that showed coverage at or just above the state minimum on every shift. When a nurse called out and no one could be found to fill the slot, the original nurse's name simply stayed on the log. When a CNA left at hour 5 of an 8-hour block because her child's school had called, the log showed her finishing the full 8. When the night shift ran with 2 aides instead of the 4 the schedule called for, the log showed 4. The pattern accelerated in 2018. Investigators counted 31 distinct shifts across that calendar year in which the staffing log listed employees who had not badged into the building at any point in the 24-hour window the log covered. By 2019, the figure was 78. By 2020, with the COVID pandemic stretching every long-term care facility in the country to its breaking point and pulling staff out of buildings for quarantine after quarantine, the figure was 146. The funds tied to those staffing levels flowed in steadily. Hillcrest's quarterly reimbursement reports, all prepared and signed by Yvonne, consistently showed direct care hours at or above the state minimum. Per diem payments arrived on schedule. The facility passed 2 annual state surveys with documentation citations only, minor paperwork issues, nothing that would trigger a deeper look. A 2019 corporate audit, conducted by an outside accounting firm out of Charlotte, sampled 12 shifts at random and found the staffing log and the schedule in perfect agreement. The audit did not pull badge data. Badge data was not in the audit's scope. Inside the building, the residents lived inside the gap. Call lights stayed lit. Bed checks ran late. Medication passes that should have started at 6 in the morning did not begin until 7:30. An 87-year-old man named Harold Vinson, a retired Norfolk Southern dispatcher with mid-stage Parkinson's, sometimes waited 40 minutes for someone to help him with his breakfast tray. His tremor made it impossible for him to bring a cup of orange juice to his mouth without spilling it. He learned to wait. A woman named Marjorie Daughtry, 91, a former second-grade teacher who had taught in Rockdale County schools for 36 years, needed to be repositioned every 2 hours to prevent pressure sores. She was found on 3 separate occasions to have been left on the same side for more than 6 hours. Her daughter, who visited every Saturday, started taking photographs. The aides who were actually there saw it. The licensed staff who were actually there saw it. 2 nurses raised concerns through the facility's internal grievance process in early 2020. Both grievances were filed in a manila folder in Yvonne's office. Both were marked addressed with no description of what addressing had taken place. One of the nurses, a Filipino-American RN named Maricel Santos, resigned 6 weeks later. Her exit interview, conducted by Yvonne herself, listed her reason for leaving as personal family obligations. She had also, 2 weeks earlier, mailed a typed 3-page letter to the Georgia Department of Community Health describing, with dates and names and shift times, what she had seen. The letter sat in a queue at the department's complaint intake office. It was logged. It was assigned a tracking number. It was not, at any point in the next 13 months, opened by anyone with the authority to act on it. The catalyst arrived in the form of a 44-year-old high school librarian from Covington named Renee Daughtry. Marjorie Daughtry, her mother, had been at Hillcrest since 2019. Renee visited every Saturday morning without fail. She brought magazines from the Conyers Public Library, a paperback novel her mother could no longer read but liked to hold, and a small cup of coffee with 2 creams from the Dunkin' off Highway 138. She sat with her mother for 2 to 3 hours. She held her hand. She watched. What she watched, increasingly, was a unit where call lights blinked unanswered for stretches of 15, 20, 30 minutes at a time. She watched a single aide try to manage a hall of 22 residents during what was supposed to be a 4-aide shift. She watched her mother soil herself waiting for help that was on the schedule, but not in the building. She watched her mother apologize for it. In March of 2021, Renee began documenting. She kept a small spiral notebook in her purse, the kind a reporter would use. She wrote down the time she arrived, the time she pressed her mother's call button, the time anyone responded. She photographed the empty nurses' station. She photographed the staffing board in the hallway, a dry erase whiteboard that listed the days assigned personnel with a smiling sun magnet next to each name. She photographed the food cart sitting outside her mother's door at 11 in the morning, the tray cold, untouched. Across 47 Saturday visits between March 2021 and the end of that summer, she counted 6 occasions on which an employee listed on the hallway board was, to her direct observation, not present in the building during her entire visit. Twice, the listed charge nurse had been one of those missing employees. Once, on a Saturday in July, the board listed 4 CNAs assigned to her mother's hall. Renee, who had begun walking the length of the hall on her arrival to count people, found one. In June of 2021, Renee filed a formal complaint with the Georgia Long-Term Care Ombudsman's office. She included her notebook, her photographs, the dates of every visit, and a written request that the facility produce its staffing records for the previous 12 months under the state's public record statute for nursing home compliance documentation. The ombudsman forwarded the complaint to the Department of Community Health. The intake analyst who received it pulled the file and discovered, 2 folders behind it, the unopened letter from Maricel Santos. She read both. She walked them down the hall to her supervisor that afternoon. The department opened a formal investigation on July 6, 2021. The first thing the investigation did was request the facility's staffing logs for the previous 3 years. Yvonne provided them within 48 hours. They were complete. They were organized. They were printed on Hillcrest letterhead and bound in 3 black plastic binders. They showed full staffing on nearly every shift in question. The second thing the investigation did, on the advice of a junior DCH analyst named Pradeep Venkatesan, who had recently completed a Medicaid fraud detection training at the State Academy in Forsyth, was request the corresponding badge access logs from the facility's security vendor, a company headquartered in Norcross. Yvonne did not provide those. She did not control them. The vendor sent them directly in a single encrypted email, 11 days later. The badge data arrived as a single CSV file, 3 years and 7 months of time-stamped entries and exits for every employee who had ever held a Hillcrest access card. There were 473,000 entries. Each row contained a badge number, an employee name, a door identifier, and a timestamp accurate to the second. Pradeep Venkatesan spent 6 weeks cross-referencing it against the staffing logs Yvonne had submitted. He worked at a borrowed desk in the back of the DCH compliance office in Atlanta. He used Excel. He used a second laptop running the staffing logs side by side. He printed nothing because there was too much to print. What he found by the end of August 2021 was a catalog. Across the 37 months under review, the staffing log listed 1,472 distinct employee shifts that the badge system had no record of. Some were ghost shifts attributed to employees who were on approved leave. Some were attributed to employees who had been terminated months before. Some were attributed to employees who, according to their own payroll records from their second jobs, had been working at a different facility across town during the exact hours the Hillcrest log claimed they were on the floor in Conyers. 11 shifts were attributed to a nurse named Bethany Crowder, who had moved to Portland, Oregon in October 2018 and had not set foot in the state of Georgia since. The estimated overpayment from the state, based on the difference between staffing reimbursement claimed and staffing reimbursement that would have applied at actual levels, was $384,712. That figure did not include the residents. Investigators from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, brought in by DCH in September, began interviewing former and current Hillcrest staff. 11 employees gave sworn statements. The pattern they described was consistent. Yvonne kept the master schedule on a clipboard in her office. She maintained a second document on her work laptop, password protected, that she updated weekly. Several aides remembered being asked to sign blank end-of-shift attestations and being told that the office would fill in the times later. One CNA, a 26-year-old named Brianna Holloway, remembered being asked by Yvonne in February of 2021 to initial a log entry showing she had worked a shift she had not worked. She told me payroll messed up and they needed the signature to fix it, Holloway said in her recorded statement to the GBI. She gave me a $50 Walmart gift card. I didn't ask any more questions. I needed the $50. My son needed school clothes. The smoking gun, when investigators built their final case, was not the gift card. It was a single spreadsheet, pulled from Yvonne's work laptop after a search warrant was executed at the facility in October. The file was named schedule_master_actual.xlsx. It tracked, in a separate column from the official schedule, which shifts had run short and by how many staff. The column was titled Gap. Across 37 months, the GAPI column tallied to 2,341 missing caregiver shifts. She had been keeping her own ledger of the difference. She knew the number. She had written it down in her own column every week for 3 years. The residents had been filling the gap themselves. They had been filling it with waiting. We are heading into the arrest now. If this case is hitting hard, leave a comment for the residents and the families involved. Subscribe if you appreciate coverage that local outlets do not pick up and national outlets do not bother with. The people who lived inside that hallway deserve an audience. On the morning of October 19th, 2021, at 7:42 a.m., 2 GBI agents and a Rockdale County Sheriff's investigator entered the front lobby of Hillcrest Skilled Nursing. The front desk receptionist, a woman named Carla Watts, who had worked at Hillcrest for 9 years, picked up her phone and called Yvonne's office. She did not say why. She did not have to. Yvonne came down the long carpeted hallway from the administrator's wing, holding a ceramic coffee mug and a clipboard. She was wearing a navy blazer over a cream blouse and pressed gray slacks. Her hair was pulled back in the same low bun she wore every workday. Her photo ID badge was clipped to her lapel. She saw the agents. She stopped walking. She did not turn around. "Ms. Adeyemi," the lead agent said. His name was Special Agent Marcus Whitfield. "We have a warrant for your arrest. We also have a warrant to search this facility and your office. Please set down the items in your hands." Yvonne set down the coffee mug on the reception counter. She set down the clipboard next to it. Her hands did not shake. "On what charges?" she said. It was not a question. It was a request for the form. Felony fraud against the state of Georgia. Falsifying business records. Theft by taking from a government entity. Possible additional counts pending the indictment review. "I would like to call my attorney." "You will be able to do that at the station, ma'am." "I would like to call my husband first." "At the station, ma'am." She did not argue. She did not raise her voice. She turned, walked back down the hallway to her office at a measured pace, allowed the 2 agents to follow her in, and stood quietly beside the door while one of them photographed the contents of her desk. Her work laptop was already open and powered on. The schedule_master_actual.xlsx file was, according to the digital forensics report filed 2 months later, the third most recently accessed document on the machine. She had opened it at 7:14 that morning. She had been looking at the gap column when her receptionist called. When the agents handcuffed her in the hallway outside her office, 3 residents in wheelchairs watched from the doorway of the day room. One of them, a 93-year-old former bookkeeper named Eunice Pelfrey, said nothing. She had pressed her call light at 6:48 that morning, more than an hour earlier. It had still been blinking when Yvonne walked past it on her way to the front lobby. It was answered, finally, at 8:11 a.m. Yvonne Adeyemi was booked into the Rockdale County Detention Center on the afternoon of October 19, 2021. She was charged with 12 felony counts, 1 count of theft by taking from a government entity, 4 counts of Medicaid fraud under OCGA Section 49-4-146, 6 counts of falsifying business records, and 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the state. Additional counts of elder neglect related to specific identified residents, including Marjorie Daughtry and Harold Vinson, were under review at the time of indictment. She was released the following morning on a $100,000 bond posted through a bail bondsman in Decatur. Her passport was surrendered. Her nursing home administrator's license was suspended by the Georgia Healthcare Facility Regulation Division within 72 hours. Her registered nursing license, separately, was placed on probationary status pending the outcome of the criminal case. Hillcrest Skilled Nursing was placed on an immediate corrective action plan. New admissions were frozen. Corporate ownership installed an interim administrator within a week, a retired Army nurse from Macon named Patricia Linden. The state ombudsman's office conducted a full chart audit of every resident in the building. 2 residents were transferred to other facilities at their family's request. 3 families filed civil suits within the first month. 2 more followed by the end of the year. The criminal case, as of the most recent court calendar, remains pending. Yvonne's attorney, a former DeKalb County District Attorney named Reginald Mayweather, has filed motions to suppress the badge data on the basis of vendor chain of custody. He has filed motions to sever the neglect counts from the fraud counts, arguing that the 2 require different evidentiary standards. He has filed for a change of venue, arguing that local press coverage in the Conyers area has prejudiced the potential jury pool. The trial has been pushed twice. It is currently set for a date that may also move. What has not moved is the testimony of the families. Renee Daughtry, in a deposition recorded for the civil case in March of 2022, described what it had been like to sit beside her mother's bed and watch nobody come. She kept saying she was thirsty, Renee said. The pitcher was empty. I went and filled it from the bathroom sink because there was no one at the nurse's station. There was no one in the hall. The board in the hallway said there were 4 people on that hall. There was nobody. I want to be very clear about that. There was nobody. Marjorie Daughtry died in February of 2022 at the age of 92. Her cause of death was listed as complications of dementia. Her daughter, in a written statement submitted to the court, asked only that the staffing records of the last 6 weeks of her mother's life be entered into the record alongside the badge logs for the same period. Both were entered. The staffing records showed full staffing. The badge logs showed otherwise. Harold Vinson, the retired dispatcher with Parkinson's, was transferred to a facility in Decatur in November of 2021. He died 6 months later. His son, in a victim impact letter that has been sealed pending the criminal trial, wrote that his father had spent the last years of his life waiting for breakfast, waiting for a glass of water, waiting for someone to help him to the bathroom, waiting in a hallway with a roster on the wall that listed 4 caregivers who were never there. Yvonne Adeyemi has not, as of the most recent filings, entered a formal plea. She has not spoken publicly. She lives in the same townhouse in Lithonia she has owned since 1999. Her husband, according to public records, has not filed for divorce. Her older son finished his MBA in Charlotte last spring. Her younger son is in his final year at Morehouse College in Atlanta. Both have declined every interview request. The trial, when it arrives, will turn on a spreadsheet and a badge log and a column titled Gap. It will turn on whether a Rockdale County jury believes that the woman who built the column knew what the column meant. Her attorney will argue documentation error and overworked administration. The state will point at 2,341 missing caregiver shifts and ask what other word fits. The residents of the Hillcrest Long-Term Care Wing already know the word. They were the gap. They filled it themselves, one unanswered call light at a time. This case sat heavy. But the case on your screen right now goes even further. What that administrator did to her patients makes this one look careful. Click it.